But additionally, you're getting matched with a mentor based on the goals you have for your Accelerate 2 timing. And it's all about preparation for over $100 million in prizes for Entrepreneurship World Cup at the end of October. Well, with no further ado, I see our YouTube and Facebook rooms filling up, and Zoom is catching up quickly. Let's get started. This week, we have a really special speaker. Lisa Curtis is the CEO and founder of Cooley Cooley, which is a food product company that has done a lot to help people just feel at their best. So from Peace Corps volunteer all the way through to communications expert and then founder, Lisa really embodies the story of what we care you guys always understand every day going into building your businesses. It's all about solving a real problem, communicating it well, and just having the stick-to-itiveness, the perseverance to lead a team to make things happen. So we're really happy to have Lisa join us today. She's going to tell us her story, and then we'll open it up to Q&A like always. So Lisa, take it away. Welcome.
Great. Well, thanks you all so much for having me. I'm excited to be chatting with you today. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. Just want to confirm everyone can see that?
Yes, we can.
Great. Yeah, well, I will go through this and would love any questions. If you have questions as they come up, feel free to put them in the chat, or we can make sure to address all those at the end. So today I really want to talk about building buzz. And you might be sitting there thinking to yourself, like, why should you care about building buzz? What does that have to do with growing your startup? And I put together a couple of fun little word clouds. This was a word cloud from Cooley Cooley, my company's recent team retreat. And so, a lot of things we're thinking about. Sales are a big one. Moringa, the product we sell, retail, new points of distribution, the market, update. I've surveyed a few different entrepreneurs before, and imagine that something in your head might be, distribution. How do we get our products onto the market and out there? How do we get funding? What does building a team look like? I need sales, investment, equity. So many things just going around in your head right now. And my argument and postulate to you is that building buzz can get you to all of those great things. So let me explain a little bit more about how I see that and what I think building buzz is. I think, building buzz is when you get to the point where consumers start to request your product, that they start to purchase it, that they're looking for it. And what that does is that helps build a lot of traction where retailers, distributors, investors see your product and business as being viable. And then you start to get more inbound sales and more investment interest coming to you instead of you kind of hustling it and going out. So that's why I think it's a really important topic for us to be talking about and digging into. So you might be thinking, you saw this intro from Susan, but who am I? What are my credentials? Why am I here to talk to you about building buzz? So I would consider myself to be a fellow hustler in the sense that I'm also an entrepreneur, and I've really built a brand on a budget. And I, 6 years ago, had no experience in the food industry, had no connections, and really spent a lot of time and effort trying to build the brand up. And actually, last year got one of the highest awards in the food industry. We've gotten videos about my company, Cooley Cooley, that have gotten over 10 million views. I've been on everything from CNBC to MSNBC's Morning Joe and Fox News. And I found that, I've been able to really pioneer an unknown superfood. So I don't know how many of you have heard of moringa before. Certainly hoping that some of you have. And for those of you who don't, it's amazing superfood, more nutritious than kale. And when I launched Cooley Cooley back in 2014, pretty much no one had heard of it. And then we've gotten it onto Good Morning America. They called it a top wellness trend. The Today Show called it hot new food trend, and a whole slew of women's health magazines have said, this is the new matcha, kale, turmeric, and really pioneering it in a big way in the US. And so buzz has been a really critical part of our growth. And I think there's a whole new playing field. And I know that you all come from a variety of industries. So please indulge me when I use my industry, the food industry is the example, where, in the past, you had companies like Kellogg's and General Mills and Coca-Cola. And those were really the folks that could get their brands out there. They were the ones who were buying billboard ads and big marketing campaigns, big marketing dollars, and they really had an edge over startups. But I think if you look at the playing field today, things have really shifted, where now you see food brands like RX Bar that got purchased for $600 million by Kellogg, and so much of their growth they attribute to really Facebook and Instagram influencers in the CrossFit community, and that kind of building up their base and momentum and getting them going. Or Halo Top, that was somewhat unknown ice cream brand, and they got into GQ magazine with a really phenomenal article that went viral and made them what they are today of building an incredible brand. Or Kettle and Fire, which is a brand that unusual for most food companies, didn't actually launch into retail right away. They started doing millions of dollars in broth online, which no one thought was possible, mostly through having a really great influencer marketing strategy. And so my postulate to you is that you too can take on the big dogs in your industry just by building buzz. So today, what I really want to cover and talk through is a bit about crafting your story, how to do that, how to pitch the press, how to really win on social media, how to optimize your email newsletters, partner for outsized impact, and then how to build your overall ground game. And then we will go into some questions. So let's talk a little bit about storytelling. This is a sort of funny photo of storytelling in the ancient era. Storytelling is really how humans evolved. We would tell each other stories about where the best place for hunting, buffalo was, or where the best place for foraging berries. And we told these tips in the forms of stories so that people would remember them. And that's something that's still as true today as it was centuries ago. We don't remember facts as well as we remember stories. So if you were to come to me and say, hey, I've got this great business that has, X CAC, and we're growing at, 120%, and we're about to do 3 million this year, 5 million next year, I would say, okay, that's cool. That's impressive. But if you came back to me an hour later and asked, so what do you remember about your business? I'd probably say something along like, well, I remember there was, some fast growth, but I don't really remember what. I don't really remember much about the product. Versus if you came to me and said, hey, I've got this, amazing ice cream recipe that is from my grandmother's kitchen. She used to make it for me every day after school, and it made me so happy. And it's called Smile Ice Cream because it made me smile and it makes everyone else smile. And then come back to me a few hours later, like, I remember Smile Ice Cream, right? So I think storytelling is really key to getting folks to pay attention and remember what you're doing. There's a really amazing kind of theorist of storytelling, a guy named Marshall Gantz. He's a Harvard professor and actually played a really big role on the Obama campaign in terms of helping all the campaign organizers really craft their personal stories about why they were there. And that mobilized so many volunteers of hearing those personal stories and then wanting to share their own personal stories with other people in these get out the vote efforts. And I think, regardless of what side of the political spectrum you sit on, the Obama campaign did a really amazing job of getting out the vote. And this storytelling angle was a big part of it. So he has this theory of starting with the challenge. So, what was your challenge? Maybe it was, well, after school, I came home and, I was so tired and exhausted by the day. And then I decided to have my grandmother's ice cream, and it made me feel so good. And that made me realize that like this ice cream needs to be shared with the world. So small example, but really thinking about in your pitch, how you go from a challenge to a choice to an outcome. And then you take that story of self and translate it into a story of now and a story of us. So maybe the story of now is that, this matters because people are depressed. Our economy is crashing. We're in the middle of a global pandemic. Like everyone is so upset. We need a ice cream that will make us smile. And that's really what Americans today need in order to, get back on track. So again, kind of funny example, but I think you can take what you're doing, take that story of self of why you're doing it, this kind of call to leadership, translate it into an example of why this matters right now, and then bring it to a story of why this matters to the broader community. So let me give you a personal example. So starting with my own story of self. So I was a Peace Corps volunteer back in 2011 in Niger, West Africa. It's a picture of me with one of my favorite little friends. Her name's Aisha. And I am a vegetarian and was starting to feel really weak and really tired off of eating mostly rice every day. And so I went to a few leaders in my community and I said, hey, what can I eat that will make me feel better? And they actually pulled these leaves off a tree and mixed them into this popular snack called kuli kuli. And at the time, I had never heard of moringa. I had never thought to eat tree leaves. It sounded a little weird, but I trusted these women. And so I started eating it. And it really did make me feel so much better. So I did some research. And I was like, wow, this plant has so much protein, so much calcium, so much iron. It's incredible. So I went back to some of these women and said, how can I get more people here in Niger to eat moringa and more people in West Africa to really benefit from this plant? And they said to me, well, what we really want is a way to sell it in the US and a way to make money from this crop. And so I said, sure, I'll help you. And so I realized, when I got back to America, that everybody was going crazy over kale. There's, arugula had just become a new thing. And Americans knew that they weren't getting enough greens in their diet. But often, spending your mornings ripping up kale leaves was too much work. And so I saw that moringa was this perfect solution for that moment in time of Americans waking up to greens, and saw that I could spread it in the form of powders, bars, shots, and really bring it to a wider audience. And so that's kind of our story. And that story I find I use all the time, not just with investors or with other potential hires, but especially with the press. And so let's talk a little bit about pitching the press. I often find when people say, oh, yes, I sent out a press release and, the press, nobody wants to hear what I have to say because nobody responded. And then I'll ask some more questions about like, well, how did you send out that press release? Did you customize it to a sort of select list of reporters, people who are interested in what you're building, people who've written about similar things? And generally I hear something of like, no, I just found this list of 1,000 reporters and I blasted this press release. And reporters are humans too, and especially in this era of media cuts, when they're so busy, they don't have time to read these generic press releases. What's really going to catch their attention is doing more personalized and handing everything that they need for their story to them on a silver platter. So really thinking about what is the hook. I often find sometimes, even though we all consume tons of media, we don't think about, what is my company doing that is media worthy or not. So, if you read TechCrunch, you'll see tons of coverage on financings. If you read USA Today, you'll see anything with a celebrity all over it. Surprising partnerships get a lot of coverage. Stuff around holidays is generally good. New science, New York Times most popular list, it's all about like chocolate is now good for you. Wine is good for you. Look at this coffee diet. So that kind of thing works really well. Unique ingredients work well, unique supply chains, and then compelling founder stories are great, especially for more lifestyle pieces. I think things that people often send out in these press releases that they don't get as much attention as they would like. New product launches, if you just say like, hey, I'm launching this new tech dashboard and send that out and blast it out without giving any context about like, well, dashboards are this really important thing. And, the CIA says we need dashboards to use all of our intelligence or what have you. That could be maybe interesting, but just the new product in itself, probably not. Retailer launches, probably not unless they're like unexpected or unique in certain ways. And similarly, revenue numbers, unless there's like a unique tactic or impressive growth rate that you can share. So you're probably thinking to yourself, like, I don't have time for this. This is too much work. And it is a fair amount of work. In Cooley's early days, we had a fair amount of summer interns, even sometimes volunteers. And one of the things that folks like that are great at is looking through the news and finding who's writing about that and really gathering together a list of highly targeted reporters. Some other tools that we use, Haro, help a reporter out. That's a nice way where reporters will send out, hey, I'm looking to interview someone who can speak as a Black business owner about the impact of Black Lives Matter. And then you can say like, yes, that fits me, and I'll respond. And maybe you'll get interviewed for a big publication. Or you can use Google Alerts. I personally will always have something on both Moringa and Cooley, but also things like superfoods and anti-inflammatory and Ayurvedic to see who's writing about that. Twitter lists, a lot of reporters are on Twitter. Gmail canned responses, that's a really easy way to like have kind of a canned pitch and then customize it and put that in easily. And then Boomerang, I find, is a great tool for if somebody doesn't respond, getting that email to come back to my inbox so that I remember to follow up with them. This is a fun example of one of the times when my pitching skills were really tested. And, I challenge all of you to really think about, can you do this 30-second pitch? This was on CNBC, and I had 30 seconds to pitch to these judges. And then they were going to say, would we invest or not? They all said they would, which was great. And I think I spent a lot of time reflecting on that pitch and refining that pitch. And, one of the things I realized is like, it is so much harder to say something short and succinct than it is to spend a long time and, have multiple minutes or multiple paragraphs. And so really challenge you all to, if you don't have your 30-second pitch, make sure that you've got that down. Because if you get on the phone with a reporter, first thing they'll say, tell me about your business. You want to have something real snappy. So let's talk about social media. So I imagine many of you are social media savvy, probably use it in your personal life, maybe also use it for your businesses. Some of you may even know more than me about social media. I certainly don't claim to be a social media expert. But one of the things that I think has made Cooley successful at social media is really trying to engage in dialogue and having it be a conversation and not just a one-way street. And really understanding that we are all inundated with information these days. We live in the information era, so many things going on. We're probably looking at our phone while we're cooking dinner, while we're trying to keep our 4-year-old from like driving the 2-year-old crazy. And so making sure that everything we put out there is very quick, easy to follow. So this is like, a 30-second video we put together, and we found that those types of very quick videos and information do really, really well. The other thing we try to do is really nurture our community. So we do lots of giveaways with different partners. We send stuff to influencers. This is some product and like this cool, information kit on Moringa we sent. We try to have relevant content. So made some Moringa lattes during the holiday season to really talk about that. And then exclusive promotions so that folks who sign up on our email newsletter or follow us on social media are the first to know when we've got promos going for them. One of the most direct channels that I think sometimes gets overlooked because it feels outdated is really email. Email is the single best form of communication and e-commerce revenue. And we found that often having pictures of people in our emails does really well, that kind of resonates with other folks. And just making sure that we keep our emails short, that we keep them interesting, that our consumers want to open our emails because they're exciting and unique. If you don't have an email list yet, I would say start building it. A great place to start is with your friends and family. You can download your email contacts, send an email out to those folks and say, hey, I'm setting up this monthly or bi-monthly email newsletter to give awesome information about the startup I'm building. Are you willing to be on it? And oftentimes people will say yes. It's not a huge ask, and that can help you build an email newsletter and really help boost your credibility when you say, like, I've got 2,000 people on my email newsletter, or 30,000 people, and get that going right away. A couple of best practices. So welcome series is really important. You've probably seen this, if you were to sign up for Cooley Cooley's email newsletter, which you should all do, you'll get an email saying, welcome to Cooley Cooley. You'll get that right away. You'll get an email a couple days from now saying, here's a little more information about Moringa. You'll get an email after that saying, here's some info about our products, kind of leading you down the trail. Similarly, you can have email campaigns. So for example, if you were to download this like free download on turmeric's benefits, then you would get a bunch of emails about turmeric's benefits, why that's so great. Very important to A/B test subject lines, and then also to do lots of pop-up signups so that people join your email list from that. One of the biggest things that we found that has made an outsized impact on Cooley Cooley has been partnerships. So this is a photo of Haiti, as some of you may know. So Haiti's on the left, the Dominican Republic's on the right. This was one of the photos that got sent to me back in 2015 by someone from the Clinton Foundation, who basically said, there's incredible rates of deforestation. Haiti only has 1% of its original forest. We're looking at different trees to help reforest the island. And we were wondering if you'd be interested in working with us on Moringa. And that was a really exciting opportunity for us to say, like, yes, at the time we were only sourcing from West Africa, but we thought Haiti would be a really amazing second place to source from, both to create an impact and also to build some buzz. So we brought together a few different partners. So the Timberland Foundation, the Clinton Foundation, Indiegogo, Chef Jose's World Central Kitchen, and then Whole Foods Market. And we created an entirely new product made with Moringa from Haiti that were in these form of these shots that we then launched nationwide with Whole Foods. And so that was a pretty incredible way for us to just see the power of aligning with bigger brands, because we got so much attention, even though we were a very small startup. We were 2 years old at the time. We got featured in all sorts of press. Chelsea Clinton went down to Haiti, held a moringa tree, and talked about us in front of this global stage. And so really found that was a great way to get it out there. And so I think one of the keys is to really figure out who your natural partners are and ensure that you are, getting in front of those folks and, finding where those puzzle pieces fit. Like, what is the win-win? So if you're, creating a tech platform, like, who would be some of the big guys in your industry who might use it? What are some of the smaller ways you can partner with them today? So found that to be really key. Another thing that we do, especially since we're in the food industry, but I think it's important for any industry, is really building your ground game. This is, of course, something relevant post-COVID, but sort of in the pre-COVID era, Cooley Cooley's traditionally had a really amazing field marketing team. And actually Sergio, who referred me to do this webinar, leads up our field marketing team. And so we've had folks, in stores, passing out samples, talking to customers, and we really work closely with them to make sure that they are both educating the customers, but also educating the store staff, and then leaving things behind, these retail tools, such that when they leave, there's still, there's still a lasting impact from these demos. And so have put together all these great retailer tools, from clip strips to freezer drawers to shelf talkers, that are really great for just, keeping the conversation going and getting our product to stick out a little more. So today we've talked about crafting a story of self, a story of now, a story of us, talked about personalizing pitches and making sure you really get that silver platter for reporters going. We've talked about, building a social community and really nurturing that community, focusing on email, starting an email newsletter, finding the right partners, and then getting into the field. So with that, I would love to take any questions. I'll also throw up here, this is my contact info at Cooley Cooley Foods. You can find us on all the social channels if you want to check out what we're doing there, and would love feedback there as well. So I'll stop sharing so we can dive into Q&A.
So Carlos and I are both going to handle Q&A. And what I'd love to start with is really, if you could share a little bit more about, I'm so sorry, everyone. If you could share a little bit more about the landscape of what you saw when you first started looking at bringing Moringa into the US, what was already out there, and how you really thought about the brand positioning and telling that story across all of these other substitutes. I think that'd be really helpful.
Yeah, so when we started, Moringa was not very well known at all. There really wasn't any brand focus on it. And so we were first to market and getting Moringa out there and really pioneering it in a big way. And so I think, it's a bit of a double-edged sword in the sense that it was great that we were first to market, but also challenging in that we really needed to do a lot of education. And so I think for me, having a background in communications really came in handy. And then that's been a way that I've kind of leveraged and grown Cooley Cooley, is through these strategies to really build buzz.
And how have things changed? Because it's been several years. So when you first started, what did you think the biggest challenges would be? And how has the kind of challenge phase evolved over the last few years?
Yeah, so, I think when we first started, I, coming out of the Peace Corps, just had this idea of like, oh, people will want to buy this because it's something that's good for the world, that this can help women in Africa, this can plant trees all over the world. Like that's why they want it. And then what I pretty quickly realized is people don't walk into a grocery store and say, what's the most impactful thing I can purchase? That's not really the mentality we have. We think about like, what is the product that is something I want, whether I want that from a health and nutrition perspective, or I want that from I want some Oreos, something, really delicious. And so we found that talking to our customers and talking to those kind of super fans helped us to understand that, oh, it was really about like the benefits in Moringa translating into natural nutrition powered energy, that this was a caffeine-free energy source, that Moringa in some ways was, kind of the perfect food, and that it had a lot of the protein, calcium, iron, and vitamins that folks needed.
And I think it's also really helpful for people to understand actually building a brand from scratch with something brand new. So can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, I think the dog's excited about it. No worries. Yeah, so, building a brand from scratch takes a lot of work. I think it also takes time. We we knew that this wasn't going to be an overnight thing. But I think when you build it with a lot of authenticity, when you build it in a way that, consumers can relate to, they can understand why this is beneficial for me, why this is beneficial from the world, you can get traction pretty fast. We, in our third year on the market, received investment from Kellogg, which is one of the largest food companies in the world. And I think a lot of people were like, why, what, like this Moringa startup? And what we heard from them is they really liked the story. They liked, learn the sort of why we started the company, what we were doing with the company, and felt like that resonated. And, I think we're all looking for meaning. And especially in a world with like so much information, so many things happening, we really want authenticity, and we want authenticity from the brands that we purchase.
So somebody has asked, Joseph asked, what's the scientific name of Moringa? And have you done some research on the distribution of Moringa in the world?
Yeah, so the scientific name of Moringa is Moringa oleifera, and it is distributed quite a few places. So there's two different varieties of Moringa. So one is indigenous to the Himalayan region, so kind of India and Nepal. The other is indigenous to East Africa, Ethiopia specifically. And since then, it's grown all over the place. So we source from a few different countries, primarily in the African continent, and then a little bit in Southeast Asia and South America, but have found that, it's called the miracle tree in a lot of the world. It's used differently in different places. We've even found, in Florida, there's some moringa trees growing if you look around.
So I think one of the other really interesting parts of your story here is how you've balanced being a social entrepreneur and really having massive impact while also being investment worthy of a company like Kellogg's. So did you kind of walk into this saying, okay, I want to make a difference and make money, or what was your philosophy starting, and has that evolved?
Yeah, I mean, coming out of the Peace Corps, I think I was first and foremost interested in like, how do I use this plant to create social change? And I'm a big believer in the idea that the market is a really powerful force for change. If you think of, the speed at which corporate America can accomplish things versus like US government or a lot of nonprofits, often you can move a lot faster in the private sector. And so that was really interesting to me. And at the same time, I realized, if I was going to go through with this, like sort of no market, no mission, that I had to prove there was a market. I had to have really great products that, had to be cutting edge, had to be getting out there in a big way. And that was the way to truly fulfill the mission, was to be successful in business. So I don't see them as being so much of a balancing act as kind of one feeding the other. And, my definition of a social enterprise is an enterprise where if you took out the social part, the enterprise would cease to exist. And so in our case, sort of sourcing moringa from small farmers that we do, it's not a one-for-one model. It's not a CSR arm. That's a core fundamental part of our business. And the way that we do it, and kind of the transparency and sustainability that we bring to it, is part of what makes us a really good partner. And so I think that is key to being a social enterprise and being a successful one.
So what are some of the business metrics that you consider the most important, and what are some of the impact metrics that you consider most important?
Yeah, so from the business side, I think like a lot of businesses, we look at revenue. We look at revenue growth. Certainly this year has been a little more challenging than others, but we've had traditionally averaged over 100% growth each year. We've also looked at, how many customers do we have? So right now we're distributed in 11,000 retail locations. That, when we started, we were in like one. So that's grown a lot. And we looked at customer satisfaction and kind of the feedback we get from our customers, and also velocity in stores. How fast are we moving products off the shelf? From an impact perspective, we look at, how much money are we able to put in the hands of small farmers? So we've put over over $5 million in the hands of small farmers to date. We look at how we're able to grow our supply chain. The cool thing about selling moringa leaves is you plant a lot of trees through that, and those trees don't, die or get chopped down. You just pull off the leaves and can continue to harvest them year round. So we've planted 24 million trees. And then we look at like the overall number of the people we're impacting, from the people growing the moringa to the people processing the moringa. And right now that's about 3,000 people whose livelihoods we're supporting. So we look at both, and we track and report out on both.
So I know you have several different products that you offer at this point. Could you walk us through how you found product market fit from the beginning, first thing where you're introducing a brand new product line into this country? And then as you've evolved, what's your process been for new product creation and really finding the right fit, as well as with pricing?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And maybe I'll just show my screen because sometimes it's easier to see the products and just kind of look at them. So we started off with bars. So that was the first product we launched, were these bars down here. And that, I think a large reason that we launched them was because bars were one of the easiest things that we could make, which is part of the reason there's so many bars on the market. And so we started off, making them by hand, testing them in farmers markets, iterating on them, making them better, and then launching them onto the market. We then, from there, did kind of an online test with our moringa powder. We weren't sure if people were going to know what to do with moringa, if they were going to want to purchase it. And so we put it online and actually found it sold extraordinarily well. So that gave us the confidence we needed to then launch that into retail. And then we built off that product line with a few other powders as well. And then through the partnership with the Clinton Foundation and Whole Foods, we launched the shots. So I would say in terms of product market fit, we've really looked at what are interesting opportunities. Like when we walk into a grocery store, what's already on the shelves, what isn't on the shelves, what are consumers looking for? I think more folks, are looking for stuff that's nutrient dense, that's sustainable, clean label, tasty. And so found that played a big role in it.
Could you speak for a minute, Carlos? I have one more question, and then I know you have a lot of questions coming in from our viewers and other places. Lisa, can you speak for a minute about pricing and how the profitability breaks down when it's direct to consumer on your website versus through different types of retailers? Because a lot of people on this call are doing lots of different types of businesses, and many people don't realize the retail pricing versus e-commerce pricing and what it actually looks like for food products. So if you could give us kind of a breakdown of how that works, that'd be really helpful.
Yeah, totally. So it does vary a lot by industry. I think the interesting thing about the food industry is that there's so many different players. So basically you're selling to we sell to a distributor who then sells to a retailer. The retailer sells to a consumer. So there's different markups along the way. So say if we sell something for $1, generally the distributor would then sell it to a retailer for $1.50. That retailer might mark it up to something like $2.50 or even $3, depending on their margin. And so you find that, at the end of the day, the brand is getting a much smaller piece of the pie. That being said, the majority of Americans, and even sort of globally, people still buy their product in retail grocery stores. I think that's changed a lot with COVID. We've seen a huge acceleration in e-commerce. And in e-commerce, we sell generally directly through different platforms, be it our own website or Amazon, to customers. And so we retain a much higher margin. But we also do a lot of marketing. So we found, like, with Amazon, we spend a lot on AMS, Amazon Marketing Services, to really make sure that our product gets in front of there, because anyone can put anything on the internet. And so we're not as unique as we are in retail. So I think that is a thing to consider when thinking about pricing, is understanding the difference in e-commerce, the difference in retail, and then what are the industry norms. So for our industry, you want to maintain at least a 40% margin for yourself, knowing that there will be some amount of that will go towards marketing.
All right, I'm going to pass over to you, Carlos. And when it comes back to me, I have to ask about your beautiful packaging. But Carlos, you're up.
So some of the questions that started to come in directly were in response to one of the things that Susan was asking as well. But what's some of the rationale and the thought process around how to expand the product line? So, starting off with, maybe bars, and then going into powders, and then going into the shots, and, going into whatever else. How are you prioritizing exactly what is next for a potential revenue stream for Kuli Kuli?
Yeah, it's, I would say, more of an art than a science. We do a fair amount of meeting with some of our top customers. So meeting with folks like Whole Foods and saying, here's a couple of ideas we have. What are you interested in? What do you think your customers would really love? And that will often help to determine some of the products that we launch. Because generally when we launch a new product, we want to have some anchor account. So we want somebody who's super excited about the product and ready to launch it right away. And I will say, we're interesting in that we're not like a bone broth brand where we're only doing bone broth. We're working with moringa, which is a really versatile superfood. So it can go into a lot of different product categories. And so I think one thing we try to do is, make sure we don't stray too far and think about who that core consumer is, like why are they purchasing it, and what are different sort of ways that they would want to receive it.
That was great, thanks. The other question that I had was around the actual development of the product. So what type of cycle of development do you go through, and what types of iterations are made throughout this process so that something's actually market ready?
Yeah, so it looked different in kind of the early days from what it looks like now. I would say, when we were super scrappy, it was like we were making product in a commercial kitchen. We were testing it at farmers markets. We were kind of surveying everyone who walked by, understanding what they thought. Today, we do more of kind of formulation with co-packers or food scientists, people who are kind of experts at this. They then send us samples. We'll then really do kind of a smaller pilot run and have enough samples to test out with different consumer groups. And so we'll, put together focus groups and get feedback on the packaging, feedback on the taste, and then use that to help launch the perfect product.
There's sometimes social entrepreneurs have discussed some of the pressures and pains around needing to hold on to or acquire certain certifications, like something like a B Corp or something like that, whether it's for market authenticity or what have you. Understanding that all of these do cost money and time, how are early stage entrepreneurs, or what would your suggestions be on navigating whether or not to, and weighing out whether to get these types of certifications to pursue them, or what can they do as an aside where they can still potentially get some of those benefits, but without having that sort of like expensive stamp or seal of approval?
Yeah, they can definitely be very expensive. I would say, especially in the food industry where you're looking at, B Corp, organic, non-GMO, kosher, like the list goes on and on. I think it's really about knowing who your customer is and what's important to them. Fair trade too. We would love to be certified fair trade, but unfortunately we're working with a lot of small farmers in different countries. And so getting all of those different groups, these 13 different co-ops and organizations we work with fair trade certified is virtually impossible. But we know that our consumer really cares, that we're a mission-driven company and have a strong social impact. So we went and did a B Corp certification. And B Corp, I think, isn't too expensive compared to some of the other ones. And that's been a nice way for us to point to and say, hey, we've got third-party audits showing that we are a socially responsible company.
And then the last question for now, if I may, I know Susan was about to unmute, so is just around supply chain. So understanding the complexities of taking from a small maybe co-op farm to a Whole Foods in, let's say, Toledo. What's that process like, and what are some of the ways that you've been able to optimize your supply chain and logistics management?
Yeah, good question. So it is difficult. I won't paint that over. We definitely work really closely with our partners to make sure that they're consistently hitting our quality standards. Often many of the suppliers we've worked with for years before they've gotten to the point where they have, export quality moringa that they can sell to us. So it is something that develops over time. And I think it's something where it's important to bring in partners. So we've worked with different foundations, we've worked with the US State Department, we've worked with local nonprofits to really help support some of the training and capacity building that's needed for small farmers to be able to sell a product on the US market.
So I'm taking back the mic. How did you secure or develop your packaging right at the beginning when it was very low volume and you weren't necessarily able to manufacture at the scale you'd like?
Yeah, so at the very, very beginning, we literally printed stickers at Kinko's and slapped those on the bars. So that was the sort of hustler version. As we grew a little bit more, then we were able to do kind of more packaging runs. And packaging is super critical. And I think it's something that we've thought a lot about in the sense of wanting to ensure that we have really high quality packaging and so that we look bigger than we are. Even when we had kind of 3 people, 2 people, people would look at our brand and they'd be like, oh yeah, they look like they have their act together. So packaging has always been something that we've been willing to pay a little more for to get that brand credibility.
Can you speak a little bit more to the packaging side? So from where you went with stickers to this really modern, clean design, what are the main lessons learned as you've gone through different evolutions, font size, logo? Can you share some of those learnings with us?
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly not a designer, so I would say, ask an expert for some of those. But we've definitely learned, I think one of the mistakes that a lot of folks make is I have to convey everything on this packaging. It has to say, why my brand is awesome, why you should buy it, all these organic, non-GMO, whatever. And I think that less is more. And just thinking about that, especially when it comes to the retail environment, but I think really anything, folks have such a short attention span that they're really kind of scanning and just looking at what's the big call out and why does this appeal to me? And so having, spending time to look at in our industry, how does that look on the shelf? How does that look with competitors? We've literally walked into grocery stores to put packaging mock-ups on the shelf, taking a photo quickly, taking them down, put it all back together just to get a sense of what will it look like from a consumer standpoint? Will this stand out?
Well, one thing you do really well is understand that a health food consumer actually does read the label, reads the ingredients, reads the nutrition information. And even on your website, the whole nutrition label's there, which is not the norm. Some of those bars, I mean, you have to bring a magnifying glass to read what it says.
Yeah, we definitely.
So I think you did a great job with that.
Thank you. Yeah, transparency is something we really value.
But it also goes through with the educational side of what you're doing. So we have several questions coming in around convincing your customers that they need when launching a new product. But with you, it was a new product and education. So can you speak to how you balance educating people about the product in the first place, as well as here's your product as far as, a branded option for delivery of moringa?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of different types of marketing to different customers, in the sense that, both the retailers, like Whole Foods, for example, is our customer, as well as the people who shop there. And so for a retailer, we are generally saying, okay, here's all the data on like how well this product's been moving. Here's all the data on like why this is a great market fit. Why we've seen success in other retailers, how our customers aligned with yours. And then for customers, I think we're really trying to convince them that this is something that fits into something they need. And, people buy things for different needs. You can buy it because you need something that's like healthy and makes you feel good. And that's where we get it, like moringa, like non-caffeinated energy. Or you can need something that's like a chocolate just to like indulge in. And that's a different type of need. And so really identifying like what is the need that we're fulfilling, and making sure that's clear on the packaging, that's clear on our website, that's clear kind of across all of our marketing.
So what keeps you up at night as a CEO?
Oh, so many things. I think the biggest thing that I spend a lot of time thinking about is really my team, and making sure that I'm building a company that people are excited to come to work every day for, and building a brand that we can all be proud of. Because I think life's too short to do things that don't matter. And so, I want to work on something that matters, and I want to make sure that all of our employees and customers and suppliers like really feel that meaning and that purpose that's at the heart of our brand.
So can you spend a minute talking about how you recruit new people? So you have a potential need as far as a skill set. What does that recruitment process look like? How do you actually validate that they're going to be a good cultural fit? Because it sounds like the culture piece is really key.
Culture is very important. We do a lot to try to cultivate a really diverse pipeline. So we post on all sorts of different hiring outlets. And then we also tap our network and try to post, tell everyone we know, hey, we're looking for folks that meet this skill set. Who do you have? And then I think when interviewing, we actually started using this book called Who, W-H-O, that I personally love. And it sort of offers a more holistic way of interviewing. Like you start at people, what were you known for as a child? And then go all the way to like their current career. And we found that's a really good way for us to get a holistic picture of who someone is and what they care about.
I would love for you to talk for a minute about going through the diligence process with Kellogg's, because many of the companies that we work with do the traditional angel investor to some kind of fund, but going to corporate investment is a very different ball of wax. So can you go through kind of your learnings and specifically how you prepared and what you wish you had done to prepare for something like that?
Yeah, so we certainly didn't start there. So we've raised a little over $10 million to date, and started in the early days in our seed round. That was all angel investors. And that was really me just going to like every pitch event I could find, and doing so much networking, like every weeknight. I was like at some events, and hustling hard. And so that got kind of our first 500K. Then we got the news from Whole Foods. They wanted to launch this nationwide. That allowed us to pretty quickly raise another seed round of an additional 500. So we raised $1 million seed round. And then in 2016, I was on stage pitching at this event, and there was somebody from Kellogg there who came up to me afterwards and said, like, this is really interesting. I'm interested in learning more. And so we were like, okay, well, let's talk about it. And, at the time I didn't think that like the maker of Frosted Flakes would be investing in this, kind of unknown green superfood African startup. But it was really amazing to me just like how much their values aligned with the values of authenticity, the values of impact that we help, all the way up to the CEO. So I ended up going to Battle Creek and spent an hour with the CEO, and he spent the whole time talking about how much he wanted Kellogg to act more like a startup and how much value he thought that we could bring to them, which, you know, you're sitting with somebody who runs a $25 billion company, and they're saying that your tiny little startup like has a lot of value to offer. So I thought that was just like such a cool perspective. You know, corporate diligence is not a joke. It did take a while. We were supposed to close in September, and then just because of like all the things that their lawyers kept coming for, we ended up closing literally New Year's Day. So I was on vacation in Hawaii with my husband and a couple of friends. And because, you know, they're on the East Coast, I'm on Hawaiian time. I was waking up at 4 a.m. to like have calls with these lawyers, and just it was terrible. But when we finally closed, I then got like very sick and spent a week in bed. And after that, I celebrated. So it was an interesting process.
Well, but I think that says a lot. The fact that the lawyers were working over that Christmas break week is really, that says a lot about the company, that they are thinking like a startup and trying to get a deal done, which already is an awesome green flag for me that they're going to be the kind of partners you're looking for.
Yes, we got it done. Final hour.
So what was your expectation going into that versus like, what have you learned going through that process? I'm sure they help with distribution, but have you learned from them anything about manufacturing, supply chain management, et cetera?
I mean, I think, you know, when it comes to manufacturing and supply chain management, it's easier for us to learn from companies that are maybe like, you know, a couple tiers above. Like, you know, we're roughly a $5 million company. It's easier for us to learn from companies that are like 10 million, 20 million, as opposed to like a $25 billion company. It's just a different scale. But on the sales side, I think, you know, they've really helped us to understand customers like Walmart and others that we've launched into, and how to set up the right promotions, how to, you know, really succeed in more conventional retail outlets.
So what are the big takeaways there? Like, because I've had several friends who had different kinds of products and were in a few stores, and then all of a sudden they got a call from Walmart, which was just so overwhelming. So what are some of those takeaways, that especially things that are just unexpected for you going into that kind of scale?
Yeah, well, I know we're getting close to time here, so I'll keep it short. But I would say that, you know, the biggest takeaways is to do your homework. So we launched into 2,500 Walmart stores last year. Did a lot of research about like, what is Walmart looking for? You know, how can we be successful in Walmart? And really customized a launch plan to Walmart. And then this year, they actually launched us in 800 more stores. So that kind of customization worked. We did a big PR campaign, a big social media sort of digital ad campaign. So, you know, a lot of it was really building buzz, coming back to where we started.
Well, Lisa, you are just so direct and clear, and I can tell how much you love what you do and how much you are just probably inspiring your team every single day to just work their butts off to bring people a solution to make their lives better. So we really appreciate your time today. This was wonderful and really educational. And I hope some of our entrepreneurs get to meet you in the coming years as they launch and grow their businesses. Thank you again for your time. Really wonderful.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and good luck. Keep hustling.
Good luck to you too. Thanks, Lisa.
Okay, bye.
And everybody else, you can get ready because you'll be hearing from us really, really soon with global finalists results. And just make sure, if you haven't done whatever is in your deliverable list, get it done. Good luck with some of you on your own global finals, and we'll talk soon. See you next week.